From the studios of TvGrace International, here are the ineffable words of God. The gospel of grace on the lips of the man Christ Jesus. Abba, Father.
Okay, so let's go to today's topic, which is Learning Obedience Part 2. Let's start at Hebrews, where we were. Chapter 5. Verse 7. Is that where we all are? Yes? During the days of Jesus' earthly life, when he was called Jesus of Nazareth, he offered up prayers and petitions with loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. Why did he need to resort to pleading and begging? Because he was in weakness. He was in the flesh. He was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And having been perfected, he became the author of eternal salvation to all those obeying him, and God designated him to be a high priest in the order of Melchizedek. About this, about what we have just read, we have much to say, and it is hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. It means that it is difficult to explain because people have become slow to hear. Not in acting. In acting, they are ready to act. Tell him, walk on your knees on that staircase. Sacrifice. And he does it right away. If you tell him, light 10 candles, he lights them. Go to Mass, they go to Mass. Do Masses and they do Masses. Kiss the rosary and do so, but here. Say here. That is why it is difficult to explain. Look, 2,000 years later, I'm trying to explain something that people find difficult to understand. Very difficult for them to understand. Because they say, but Christ was a holy being. For you are a holy being too. Holy means set apart for. He was a saint set apart to perfect himself. But people can't find a way to understand that. Don't you see that they have idolized the little boy God so much? In Colombia, they call him the little boy God. And today they all walk around with dirty foreheads, with a cross of ashes, as if that was the ultimate. If it would help, well, I'd dump a bucket of ashes on myself. But it is that does not help at all. Today I noticed a woman wearing a cross on her forehead and mistakenly thought her makeup was smudged or running. Because it was raining, I eventually came to understand that it was the cross. Let's look at the second letter to the Corinthians to see what Paul said about Jesus Christ. How was he crucified? Second letter to the Corinthians chapter 13. Second letter to the Corinthians. Verse 4. Are we all there? For though he was crucified in power, in what? Christ was weak. Hey, we have evidence for what we talk about, don't we? For though he was crucified in weakness, yet he lives by the power of God. For we also are weak in him, but we shall live with him by the power of God toward you. If it were not by the power of God toward us, we could not live with him. Thank God all that spiritual covering covers you. That when you are weak, he remains faithful by the power of God that has you covered. If this were not the case, we would all disappear. Imagine that. It says we are seated together with him. Then Christ was crucified in weakness. That's why he suffered so much. Then in verse 5 he says, examine yourselves whether you are in the faith. Test yourselves, or do you not recognize yourselves that Jesus Christ is in you, unless you are reprobates? Jesus Christ is where? In. When you say, just look, I'll patiently wait for you right here next to my car. But if you say, I'll wait for you in my car, not next to, but in. And all evangelicals are reprobates. Here in Miami, all the Catholics, evangelicals, all those who do not understand this word of grace are reprobates. The question is, unless you are reprobates. What is reprobate? Well, reprobate is, for example, in a factory, sometimes they make 100 pairs of shoes. But when a seam does not fit properly, it is sold to a company that sells cheap shoes, where it doesn't matter if the stitching is poorly done. And in an airplane, it is of no relevance if it is seen. The seam. So, you purchase the desirable shoe at a 50% discount. And then when you see someone with other shoes, you ask them, how much did you pay for those shoes? I paid $80, $100. Hey, I paid more than $30. And then he asks you, where do you shop? I know that I am saved. The reason is because you purchased a pair of faulty shoes. Therefore, in the factory's machines, there is an individual responsible for sorting them. Some shoes are placed here while others are placed there, and they end up in different boxes because they are reprobates. Keep using them anyway, because sometimes what is defective is not visible, but it's not the same. It is not the same. Well, here in Miami, there are many misnamed Christians. When the angel sees them coming and hears them say, God bless you, they are sent to the reprobate box. And they come around with the same Bible you use as follows. Look, just like that, just like that, just like that. Speak. God keep you, then you are reprobated. It's no good, it doesn't pass the test because of the vocabulary. Now when you come like this, you look the same or maybe even worse. You come without a Bible and he comes with a Bible. Blessed, approved. Yes, that's right. Second letter to the Corinthians, right there, but in the 12th chapter, not the 13th. Let's go to 12 now. On verse 9, second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 12. Verse 9, it says, and he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for the power is perfected in weakness. Therefore will I boast rather most gladly in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, hello, and difficulties. Sometimes things get difficult, don't they? For when I might be weak, then I am strong. Hey, you who are sometimes going through those situations at home, and then you don't look strong. And then, since you don't look strong, you say, I don't go to church anymore. And that's where you're strong. That's where God's power is being perfected. When you feel the weight of your flesh. Well, Christ felt it in such a way that at the moment the weight, in other words, he was a human being like you and me. So for the moment, having to die without having harmed anyone, do you know what it's like to be accused of something you didn't do and remain silent? And then at the moment he said, hey, if this cup can pass from me, let it pass. But let it be your will. So you sometimes say, if this situation I am going through could be avoided, but everything works for good, Lord, let it be your will. All what? Works for good. But at that point you say, at that moment you say, this worked for what? I am extremely troubled that if someone were to ask me at this very moment, but we are reading the gospel, so there's a lot of things that mean weakness. And so that's the story of you and me. But you were called, and if you are called, you have to say, here I am, Lord. And it's quite humbling that you with that body of weakness still persist. Because if a legalist sees you, he says to you, look, you are so cool, so bad that you behave and you dare to go to church, and you tell him, well, that's where I have to go. This is for the weak. The church is for the weak. Different from the system, right? When the pastor says, here the one I see in weakness is out, we take away his membership immediately. Sometimes there are shepherds out there who have watchmen. Watch me, that one, and watch me. They watch. Then Jesus Christ was crucified in weakness. He was weak, but dying in weakness, that power that he now has, he is the measure by which you are measured. Everything perfect that he is. He passed it to you, he bestowed it on you. It says, by one offering, he made us perfect. Forever. Therefore, the church is like this. And we learn obedience. Those of us who learn obedience, well, we do it within that frame of reference. We have to learn within that situation. We have to persist. In moving forward, learning obedience, and obedience is learned, it is very personal. That is very personal with you. You know that sometimes there are people who say, look, I have a sister who went to that church and this happened to her. And I went there too. I have a cousin who went to that church and this happened to him. They judge all doctrines by what happened to the cousin. But that's not how it works. Because you are saying, look, I know where there is a barrel of apples, where there is one that is damaged. And what if it were damaged? Here the damaged ones are the good ones. The damaged ones are the good ones, and the good ones are the damaged ones here. It goes the other way around. But you have to persist in what is written. My triumph has been that I have persisted in what is written against all odds. Because we are dealing with individuals who have been tardy to hear. Therefore, they judge according to appearances and according to what they hear and listen to, but it is not a people who are accustomed to judge according to what is written. And so it is that to this day, I have won. What is written? Notice what the Apostle Paul said, speaking of a man's weakness in Galatians, which is the next book. Look at what he says. Chapter 2. Verse 17. But if while we seek to be justified by Christ, we ourselves also are found sinners. And the word sinners is because of whom he is carrying the letter, because he has already proved to us that sin was removed. In other words, Christ took away sin, but he has to speak in this expression to the Galatians because the apostles passed by and confused them. Therefore, he tells them, all right, then you make the judgment based on sin. And if we leaders, we are found in what you call sin, is that why this ministry is a ministry of sin? Even Paul put it this way. If I, Paul, I am found at fault, is that why I preach false? So, you have to learn to divide what the flesh and what the message is. And Paul had to present himself like this. Look at what he says. But if while we seek to be justified by Christ, we ourselves also are found sinners, is Christ therefore a minister of sin? Certainly what? Certainly not. So we have to be ready to understand that we are in the process of learning obedience. And this process is long. For some it is longer than for others. The latter learn faster than the first ones. They are paid the same. Some come to work at 8 in the morning and others at 3 in the afternoon and are paid the same. At 4 o'clock when we leave, right? So that parable where Christ said that the last shall be first is fulfilled. In this ministry, the last ones to arrive are the ones who do best, because they suffer less and enter into a broader revelation than those of us who started earlier. So the last ones are welcome. And greetings to the first ones. Blessed with every blessing, let's stand and greet your brother. Good evening.